Hello and welcome to the Adventure Toolkit example reel number 16. My name is Glenn Storm and I'm from Hot Iron Productions. Today we're going to go over changes from version 1.0 to version 1.1. It's been a while. Unity upgraded its code and we had to upgrade ours, and we've also added several new tools. So we'll go over the changes to the existing tools and we'll try to go through a few of the additional tools and follow up with a subsequent video. First, Unity did upgrade from Unity 4 to Unity 5, and in the process changed a lot of their code. Many developers had to upgrade, and we finally did. There wasn't really a problem with the Adventure Toolkit, but if you installed in Unity 5 projects, you did get a pop-up saying it needed to auto-convert the code. Please make a backup and hit this button. Suffice to say, you no longer need to do that, and things should work as normal. We also removed the example project from the Adventure Toolkit. This is because it was created in Unity 4. It included a lot of standard assets and code from Unity 4's standard assets, and unfortunately there was a fair number of errors that would be thrown during the example project run from Unity's own code. Again, this caused confusion by our customers. They thought there was a problem with the toolkit. Again, there wasn't, but it caused enough confusion we decided to remove it entirely. It also makes for a smaller download, so you can just download the toolkit. We will make a new example project in Unity 5, and we will offer it for free, so you can still see how the toolkit is used, and we'll actually make several projects over the long term, and that way you can see how it can be used in a variety of different kinds of games. So again, it'll be made for free. Obviously, if you have the toolkit, that'll be more useful, but the point is you will have this in the future. We also made the installation procedure simpler by removing an extra file. Editor DLL is no longer necessary. There's just one DLL to install. One of the changes in Unity 5 is the introduction of a procedural skybox. This default skybox you see in the background here is a procedural skybox. It's created with code, not created with 6 images that would be the top, bottom, front, back, left, and right. The old style top, bottom, left, right, front, back skyboxes are non-procedural. They're called cube maps as well. You can download many of these cube map skyboxes from the asset store, so they're still available. You can easily make them yourself. The render trigger, which is a tool to fade skyboxes as well as fade ambient lighting and fog, only works with non-procedural skyboxes. It's unfortunate, but we do not yet have the ability to change procedural skyboxes with our render trigger tool. So, the next item is we have 2D support for our tools. We can use our tools in 2D projects as easily as we did in 3D. So we now have one-click 2D support for the counter trigger, the event single, and the script trigger. These are triggers that used collision, and it needed a reference to an entirely different set of physics objects, the physics 2D objects for colliders. So you can simply click the box to support for 2D, and it will do so. The volume thruster tool can now act on local space as well as global space. It used to just work in global space. In other words, you would throw objects in a particular direction in global space, like always in positive X. But now what you can do is click a button and move the volume thruster tool itself, and it will throw it in local space. So you can throw it to the left and then move that tool a little bit, like rotate it, and then throw it again, and it will throw it to the left based on where that tool is rotated. Okay. That's it for the changes to the existing tools. Again, everything works the same, everything's backwards compatible, everything as it should be. It's just easier. So now let's look at the additional tools in version 1.1, and there are many of them. There's some in the action category, the cinematic category, event category, and interaction category. Let's go through a few. Here in the action menu we have the SpawnTrigger. This is a special tool that will create prefabs on the fly, and it will allow you to spawn them in a particular location, give them a name. It will also allow you to control how many of them there are in the particular scene and how long they live. This is so that you don't overload your scene with too many objects and it goes out of control. You can actually manage your spawned objects. So let's take a look at the properties here. First is spawn prefab. This is a reference to the prefab object to spawn. In my project you can see I have a prefabs folder. If you drag anything into a prefabs folder or into your project, actually it will turn into a prefab just like this has. This is an object which I've made out of a cube and a sphere. It really can have any kind of components you want. You can read more about prefabs on Unity's documentation, but suffice to say I've put this prefab under a folder called resources, and this is a necessary step. You need to have it under a folder that is called resources in order for things to be loaded dynamically at runtime. This SpawnTrigger uses that. So this is the reference to the spawn prefab that will be used. Next is SpawnTarget. This is the location, the rotation and position of the spawned object. So right now I have it set to a game object called SpawnTarget, and it happens to be sitting in the same place right now. So the next property is SpawnName, so you can actually name the object that is to spawn, and I've just named it Pawn here, but you can name it whatever you want. Next is Lifespan. This is the number of seconds that this object will live. After this, the object will be destroyed automatically due to another tool that we can talk about later. It's under the event category. It's called Spawn Life, and it's designed to destroy objects after a certain amount of time. This SpawnTrigger will attach that tool to spawned objects automatically. The next property is Max Alive, and this is the maximum number of objects that will remain in the scene from this particular factory at a time. So this factory is set to 3. There will only be 3 of these pawns alive at any one time. If I spawn a 4th, the first one will be removed. Next is Reset on Trigger, and if this is true, if this is checked, the trigger will be deactivated upon trigger and be ready for reactivation. So you can use it over and over again. So let's see how this works. I'm going to hit play, and right now the SpawnTrigger will spawn a pawn in the middle of this plane because that's where the spawn target is. If I move the spawn target somewhere else, the SpawnTrigger will make the pawn there, there, and it's only being deleted because the 5 seconds I've set for the lifespan is going away. So let's look at this in a different way. Maybe I can put this spawn target under something that moves, like this mover tool, which is just set to rotate. And so now the spawn target is rotating around the plane, and I can go ahead and spawn a few more. 1, 2, 3, and again it's set to 3. If I do a 4th, the first ones will be deleted. Again, you can have anything on these objects, and right now I have rigid body components, so they are set to collide and fall with gravity and do things like that. So you can make them as complex as you want. It's simply a prefab. Okay. Next we have SpriteAnimator, and this tool is designed to help us with 2D projects, obviously. Thanks to Jonathan Blow for Tim here. So we have a quad that has a sprite renderer on it, and all I really want to be able to do is play a series of sprites in an animation. So if I turn this thing on, I want it to play, and that's what this tool is meant to do. Let's look at the properties really quickly. First we have animation interval. This is the amount of time in seconds between the frames. So I have it set to 0.05 seconds, so it will play 20 frames a second. Next is animation series. This is an array of sprites in order to play in sequence, and I have 21 frames of Tim idling here. Next is sprite renderer. This is a reference to the object that has a sprite renderer on it, and it is set to the quad here, which is showing the first frame of this idle for Tim. Next is loop. This is a boolean that will simply loop the animation and play it from the beginning once it's done. If it's checked false, then it will play just once. Next is activate on complete, and if loop is false, then activate on complete will turn on a game object when the sequence is complete. Next is reset on complete, and again, if loop is false, this will start the this will play the animation once triggered, but then stop and deactivate the object at the end of the sequence in order to get it ready to play again, so you can do it over and over. So again, let's play, and we're going to turn on our Sprite Animator, and it is set to loop, so we're just seeing Tim breathe here in idle. It is meant to run this tool is meant to be used for multiple animations, so that you could handle different states. This is essentially a state machine, and in this case I have set up a event manager to handle the different states: idle, run, jump, etc. So if I use a event single to trigger the event manager, I can trigger the idle, I can trigger a run, I can trigger a jump. And thing to note is my jump plays, and at the end of the play it is set to activate something on complete. And here I have it activating idle. Why would I do that? Because at the end of my jump, the end of this action, I would like it to go back to idle. Typically you have things that loop and you have things that play once, and when they play once they usually go back to something like idle. So this is set for your convenience. So you can have something like Tim straightening his tie, and it will always go back to idle. Okay. So this is the sprite renderer. At the time of this video's recording, we have actually submitted the very next version of the Adventure Toolkit. This simply corrects a minor inconvenience with this tool. Here I've set it up with an event manager to manage different states, but it makes sense that these tools should just intelligently know if they're trying to override the animation on a particular object, that it should do so and turn off the old object. So we've corrected that. Version 1.2, which is already submitted, will include that feature, and you don't need to set up this state machine here with the event manager. You could simply just use these Sprite Animator tools themselves and they will work together fine. Okay. Next we have TextureAnimator. This is very similar to Sprite Animator, but simply works on textures. Why? Well, because sometimes you are working on a sprite sheet and you're working on a 2D project that's working with sprites, and sometimes you simply just want to animate a texture. In this example, I've got a texture of arrows that should animate. So if I play the animation, you can see it loop. When I say this tool is very similar, what I mean to say is that it's almost exactly the same. It has the same properties. So animation interval, again, it's the amount of time in seconds between frames. Animation textures is a series of textures to play through. The animation material, as opposed to the sprite renderer, is the reference to the material that is to be animated. Loop, again, it's here so that you can loop the animation. If it's false, it will just play once. Activate on complete will activate another object, just like Sprite Animator. And reset on complete, again, will, if checked, turn this object off and get it ready to play again, so that you can use it over and over. So again, I've set this up with a event manager to play between two animations to show that that can happen. There's a crowd clapping and there's some arrows animating. But again, if you're watching this video, quite possibly there's already version 1.2 available, and this is totally unnecessary. You could simply run these two just like this. Alright, so these are the new tools in the action menu, and we will stop here and pick it up next with the cinematic tools. Thank you for watching this video. Please stay tuned for the next one.